Now we're going to look a bit more closely at the Westminster Government's plans for compulsory age checks for online pornography in the UK. The Digital Minister, Matt Hancock, is live on PM. Thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon.
What's the detail of how these age checks will work?
Well, the plan is to make sure that we protect children online so that they can get the benefits of the internet and all the freedom that brings, but also make sure that they're protected. What'll happen is that you won't have to. It's not about identification of people wanting to access these sites. It's about verification that you are old enough. So you'll go to a site where you can verify your age, and if that's successful, it'll allow you into the site.
How will you verify yourself?
Well, there's lots of different technologies, including, for instance, showing that you've got a credit card, because credit cards are only available to the over 18s. But we haven't specified the technology. We've specified the regulator, the BBFC. They're the people who do the age controls on films, for instance, so that the process, the technology, can stay up to date as new technologies come on. What I care about is making sure that children can't view adult content and making sure there's a process in place to make sure that happens.
But you can't say at this stage how it'll work.
Well, I can give one example, which is that you can verify your age by demonstrating that you've got a valid credit card.
Yes, I get that's one of the options, yeah. But I'm not clear as to how this will work because, as you know, some experts in this are saying that your goal of having this in place by April of next year is very tight, and if you're not quite sure at this stage how it'll work, that seems tricky.
No, what I'm not going to do is rule out and say ways of doing it and say these are the only ways. I'm giving examples of how it can work, and for instance, it could also work using your passport as your identification. But I don't want to rule out ways of verification because I want to leave that to the regulator. The crucial thing is making sure that you can go through that process, and critically that if you can't, then you don't get access to the website, so that the internet, which is this brilliant thing that we almost all of us enjoy, is there for children and parents. I've got small children myself. Parents know that their children could go online without seeing materials that are intended only for adults.
Dr. Victoria Nash, who was lead author of a report commissioned on this, says the Act doesn't tackle the fact that services including Twitter and Tumblr contain hardcore porn but won't be required to introduce age checks.
Well, we haven't set out exactly which sites will be covered. We've said...
Well, how would you cover Twitter then?
Well, what we've said is that it is sites that are commercial in their intent, that use porn commercially.
Right, but if your goal is to protect children from pornography, and there's lots of porn on Twitter if you want to find it, and children can still access that... That's still a problem, isn't it?
Well, it is more difficult to tackle sites where the material is uploaded by users than sites where it's put on for the entire purpose of the site. And that is a more difficult challenge by its nature, right? So if you're on Twitter and somebody uploads their own pornographic content, it is more difficult to deal with that. Now, there are potential technological solutions, so we're working on that. But the thing is, what we wanted to do was get in place the basic structures for allowing this to happen so that we deal with the vast majority of content. The other thing that's really important here is that the research shows that the majority of children who do see porn online first come across it by accident. And I want to stop that from happening.
All right. I want to read you something that Pandora Blake wrote for The Guardian last year. She runs a niche BDSM website. She said this: "If we want to help young people stay safe online, we need to teach privacy skills and how to critique the media they will inevitably encounter online. We need to make sex education mandatory in schools. We need to answer the questions young people are asking, such as, how will I know when I'm ready for sex? And when I am, how can I make my partner feel good? Attacking online porn is a cheap way to score political points and it's a distraction from the real issues.
I think that she's got a lot of the things that she says are right. For instance, we also legislated this year already to make sex education mandatory. So, we are...
In all schools?
That came through in one of the bills just before Parliament rose
Including faith schools?
For the election. But
Including faith schools?
The point...
No, sorry, let's be clear about this. You're not saying that faith schools are going to have to teach sex education?
As part of the national curriculum, so schools that follow the national curriculum. But
right,
the point is, Eddie...
And lots of schools don't.
Well, my response to that is, of course, there are lots of things that we need to do, and I agree with a lot of what Pandora said. But to say that, therefore, you don't need to prevent children seeing adult materials online, I think misses the point.
I think she's suggesting maybe you're doing the easy thing.
No, we're doing many things. That's my point. And this is one of them. And it's a really important one. But yes, making sure that people understand the value of sex in relationships, making people understand issues around privacy and how to use the internet. These things are important as well, but they are not the only things. And sometimes people who don't want to see us tackling head-on issues of children seeing adult material online say, well, instead you should be doing these things, around the sides. And I think that's fine. Often that's worth doing. And in some cases, as I said, we've done other things too. But crucially, we want to tackle it head on too and say that if you're under the age of 18, you shouldn't be looking at porn online.
Sex education is only compulsory in council-run schools in England. It's not compulsory in Wales. Scottish faith schools can opt out. It's only compulsory in Northern Ireland. At the heart of this government's view is that some people can go through school without sex education. And the government also says these same people shouldn't look at porn until they're over 18. But they can have sex at 16. How does the government think they'll know what to do?
Well, there's this whole set of rules around this. And
I've just outlined them. How will people who haven't had sex education and can't look at porn know what to do sexually at the age of 16? And relationships and all the rest of it too.
Eddie, the only source of advice and support on these things is not... it's not only through the statutory means, but
I'm looking at the state's obligations to young people.
Yeah, and parents have obligations to young people too. And
what about the state?
Well, my answer is that only the state can ensure that websites can't provide porn on a commercial basis that young people can look at.
That's not what I'm asking you about. I'm asking you about children who do not get sex education, and you're saying they mustn't see porn until they're 18, but legally they can get married at 16. How are they going to know about sex and relationships if the state doesn't play a role in helping them understand?
Well, I suppose the point that I'm trying to make is that yes, the state has a role, and we're demonstrating that today, but society and parents also have a role. For instance, in the example that you bring up, which you imply is a contradiction, you can get married at 16, but under 18 you can only get married if you have your parents' consent. I mean, so of course parents have a role, the state has a role, and wider society has a role. But there is this area where only the state can make it happen and can protect children online, and that's what we're going to do.
All right, Matt Hancock, thank you. That's Matt Hancock, who's the digital minister. Listening to that, Amelia Tait, who's technology and digital culture writer at the New Statesman. The goal is to protect children online from things most adults would never want them to see. Do you support what the government's doing?
I don't in this sense. What was just being said there about how the government isn't supposed to intervene in sex education and parents can, that the exact same thing can be done for porn prevention. The majority of UK households are childless, so why are we implementing something that's going to affect every household?
Well, where's the harm?
The harm is there is so much harm based on what he's just said about using your credit card information. What that means is you have a digital footprint of all of your sexual preferences that can be matched to your personal information. That has huge implications for hacking, for blackmail, even for credit card fraud. In 2015, the Ashley Madison hack of the Affair website, that ruined people's lives when it came out that they were using that website. People committed suicide, they lost job opportunities, and the same thing could happen here, the exact same thing. And you know what? Who it's going to harm? It's not going to harm young people. It's going to harm old people who don't know how to set up a VPN, who don't know how to get around these rules, because kids will get around this. I can tell you that now. They will be able to get around it. So it's going to harm people that maybe they put their credit card information into a porn site, they get charged, and they don't want to tell the police.
What about the minister's point that he wants to make it harder for children to accidentally encounter porn? Now, you may be right. Maybe some young people who want to seek it out will still be able to do it. But isn't it worth using these measures to make sure that children, and there's some statistical evidence to suggest that children do sometimes accidentally encounter this stuff? Shouldn't we try to clamp down on that?
I think that what you said earlier about the fact that porn is available all across the internet, not just on porn websites, means that, this, again, I think it comes back to parental controls. Why not improve parental controls? Why not improve education to parents about what they can do to limit what their children see online?
But again, to put the point back, I put to Matt Hancock in a different context, the state must have a role, the government must have a role in this, mustn't it? Or should it just say, it's available on some sites, so please do your best?
I think that there's an educational role. I think that in terms of parental controls, if they're looking into technology that can age verify, why is the onus on everyone to prove that they are 18? Why not come up with a parental control for children that can that parents can implement in their own home?
But don't you have to do that if you want to buy alcohol or cigarettes? You have to show you're of a certain age.
Yes, but the thing is, people do buy alcohol and cigarettes if they're underage, and people will access porn if they're underage. This is just not going to work. What I'm saying is this is a disproportionate measure. It affects everyone, despite the fact, like I've said, the majority of UK households are childless. Why should this affect everyone? It's just disproportionate, and it sets an incredibly worrying precedent. Something that we haven't spoken about is how the government will ban websites that don't set up age verification. Now, this is an incredible precedent for kind of a dystopian level of surveillance. The BBFC, who's going to be in charge, will decide what that means. What is a porn website? Is a teenager drawing art on their website that's nude? Is that a porn website? Can that be banned? I think it's a terrifying precedent.
We'll hear what our listeners think. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's Amelia Tait, technology and digital culture writer at the New Statesman.